G'day and welcome back. We're going to go on a little side quest today because I really want to get some frames finished up so I can play with them. Let me let you into a little secret. I like them longer. We'll go into the merits and downsides of extended rackets in a later episode, but today I'm going to go through the various ways I've created extended length frames and some new ways I've been playing around with. Let's examine the anatomy of a tennis racket. We usually have a continuous tube of graphite, which forms the hairpin and hoop, with additional graphite completing the head and strengthening the throat. Generally, an extended frame involves lengthening the handle component, which moves our focus to the hairpin. A handle is made up of two parts, the hairpin, which is the graphite tube that extends from the throat, and the grip mold. Most brands mold the grip directly to the hairpin using polyurethane foam. Some manufacturers, mainly Head, utilise a pallet system, where the hairpin is a standard dimension across the whole racket range. The grip is made up of two halves stuck to the hairpin, which allows you to change grip sizes and also choose between two grip shapes. Finally, on the end, we staple a butt cap, and we'll investigate their finer points in a second. In the good old days, we were able to take a long body or stretch version of a frame, which had an extra inch on the handle, and cut it to size. When I was a boy, I had to cut down my frames using an old tennis ball. Both ways. If you try this approach, a little community service note. Make sure you wear a dust mask because it's not good for your lungs. Finally, measure the amount to reduce off the original length. Score a mark, triple check it, and then cut to the outer side of the mark, not down the middle. Currently, only a few extended frames are available, which are mainly tweeners, and I'm going to put that down to kids these days having no respect. Never loved the old tweener, so my only option is to add some length to a standard length frame. We can use a few methods, and how much length you're after will dictate which one you choose. Before we touch the hairpin, let's have a look at the humble butt cap. Here we have a series of cross sections for different brands, and as you can see, they're all slightly different. Now let's add some measurements, which I'm going to define as follows. Firstly, we have cap extension. This is how much the butt cap extends beyond the end of the hairpin. This differs between brands, and sometimes even within brands. We can utilise this variance if your current cap is shorter by installing a longer type, which means you could potentially add a few millimeters without having to modify your actual frame at all. To understand the limitations of modifying the handle, we have to examine the applied forces to the butt cap. We have two primary forces. Firstly, the bending force, which is caused by the palm pressing the butt cap when you swing. You can see that this results in two stress points on the handle, with this point effectively acting as a fulcrum and the line acting as a lever. The longer we make the extension, the longer the lever becomes, which results in higher force being transferred to the joint. Opposite to cap extension is the measurement of how far the butt cap overlaps the hairpin and grip, which we'll call cap overlap. Its length affects two things. Firstly, with regard to the bending forces, we saw before that the force is concentrated on the two marked points. The overlap affects where the force is transferred to the handle, and the more overlap, the longer the distance between these two pressure points, which reduces the stress concentration. More overlap also increases bending stiffness because we have created a longer structural moment arm inside the joint. Finally, this increased contact area provides additional friction, which helps with the second applied force, known as axial force, or the force pulling the butt cap off the handle. This is the force that occurs when you swing the racket and it wants to fly out of your hand, and the main thing that prevents the cap from slipping off isn't friction, but the stapling of the butt to the hairpin. The staples are attached as far as possible up the handle, which means that the overlap distance dictates how far the staples can go up the hairpin. The hairpin is made out of carbon fibre composite, which splits and frays when fastened too close to its edge. We call this edge delamination. This is much like when you nail too close to the end of a piece of wood and it splits along the grain. Therefore, we need to consider a minimum staple edge distance so that we can prevent edge delamination. Now we have an understanding of how overlap affects strength, we can add a spacer to extend the hairpin. We take into consideration bending and axial forces by ensuring that we have adequate overlap and stapling far enough up the hairpin. Let's try the short overlap butt cap on a 1/2 inch spacer and you can see why overlap matters. The short cap doesn't give us the leeway to support the staples in the hairpin. Now we try the longer butt cap, and as you can see we have plenty of overlap and plenty of fastener to edge distance, so we're most of the way there. Looking at how the bending forces translate to the spacer and the handle interface, once we glue the two together, we have what we call a butt joint, and butt joints do not like bending, because one side gets compressed and the other gets pulled, and the glue gets stressed across a much smaller area. The longer the spacer, the higher the bending force on the glue will be, so when using spacers up to 1/4 of an inch, I'm happy just gluing the spacer with epoxy and stapling the butt cap. From there up to 1/2 an inch, I will glue the butt cap to the handle as well, making the butt cap a structural sleeve over the butt joint to increase its strength. With regards to what to make the spacer out of, you can go old school and use balsa wood, which is an accessible option. Alternatively, in this brave new world, you can 3D print a spacer that also includes the hairpin holes to give you silicone and weighting access, but make sure you use plastic that bonds to epoxy. So to summarize spacer extension, keep your overlap high, always glue the spacer, and make sure you glue the butt cap to the handle over 1/4 of an inch. One thing I'll touch on is the XTD butt cap, which extends the racket purely with cap extension, and you can see that they mitigate this extended leverage by greatly increasing the handle overlap to distribute the force. So while it is a safe and easy way to add some length, there are some compromises to be wary of. Firstly, the extended sleeve makes the grip thicker by 1/2 a grip size, up to the end of the butt cap, which creates a little step, which for me is in the wrong place. I've tried using a 1/2 size shrink sleeve to fill the gap, but it's too much hassle, and I don't actually use 1/2 grip sizes. Secondly, the butt cap doesn't have a trapdoor, and if you're doing dumb things like extending your rackets, you're also adding weight. Finally, when taking the original butt cap extension into account, replacing it with the XTD does not give an exact extension length. So while the XTD is not for me, it has its place in the world. It's a simple way to extend your handle if you're okay with the compromises. And more importantly, it's reversible, which might be helpful if you're always churning through new frames. If you're in the head family, you can take advantage of the pallet grip, as they are supplied in a length to accommodate their 28-inch frames. These have to be cut to size on installation, so what we can do is cut the pallet slightly over length. I've never had any issues going 1/4 of an inch over, and if you want to live life on the edge, you could go up to 1/2 an inch. It would just exert some more bending force in the pallet, so worst case, you'd crack a pallet, not destroy your hairpin in any case. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of toys. One of them is a CNC mill, so what I've been playing with is milling a step off the polyurethane handle down to the hairpin, and then machining an ABS plastic spacer sleeve that goes over this. The overlap gives a much stronger interface than a butt joint. As we can see in this diagram, since the shelf and sleeve have introduced a bonding surface parallel to the bending plane, this translates bending force at the handle to shear force at the joint, allowing the whole glue area to equally absorb the bending and axial forces. By using machined ABS, I'm using a material strong and thick enough to take staples, so we are also taking minimum staple edge distance off the table. This method provides enough bending and axial support so that the butt cap can actually be attached to just the spacer. The coolest thing about this is that it opens up the chance to use any butt cap regardless of cap overlap, and extensions beyond 27.5 inches, which, let's get real, are only useful for fun Davydenko replicas. So let's see this in practice. As you can see, I've milled off the shelf, making sure not to remove any of the actual hairpin. And here we have the spacer, with the recess for the shelf and machined out of ABS. It pushes on nicely like so. As you can see, the holes also match up with the hairpin. And I'm sure you're curious, the extender weighs in at 6 grams. We then coat it with epoxy, making sure we cover all of the mating surfaces, and pop the spacer on. Clean up the excess and let it cure. When it's set, we add the butt cap, staple it on, grip it up, and bingo bango, we're done. A final option we have is to 3D print a complete pallet, complete with the extension and with or without a butt cap. If you print something like this with PPACF in the right layer direction, you'll end up with something plenty strong enough. I haven't played with it, but weight would become a consideration. If you aren't using a head frame, you'd have to remove the foam grip, which is a mess and irreversible, so bear that in mind. You could also change grip shapes as well, but we'll steer away from that for this video. If you're doing a lot of butt cap installs, you'll want to use the same staples as the factory. The spec of staple is called 4J series, and you shoot them with a staple gun. Most of them are air powered, but I've grabbed an electric one off AliExpress. That's all I have to say about that. Hope you found it interesting, and I'll rant about the virtues of extended length frames in a later episode. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of It's Not Racket Science.